Good morning, everybody, and happy Monday to you. And welcome to another daily episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch. I am your host. And now I have a really amazing guest for you guys. But before I bring him up, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor. You guys already know the routine. Head over to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, before I bring on my next guest, I would like to remind you that this is for educational purposes only. Now, without further ado, help me welcome my next guest, Jeff Spikes. Jeff, how you doing today, brother?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. I'm grateful to be here, Tony.
Yes, man. I thank you for being on the show today, man. And before we get started, introduce yourself, tell people where you're from, and tell people about the work that you do.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I'm from Arizona, not originally, but I've lived there for about 30 years, I think. So I'm a true Arizonan at this point, I believe. And I travel a lot. So right now I'm in Minnesota and I'm in St. Louis quite a bit. And I travel the country speaking and doing groups on strengths and on getting teams aligned and working with individuals. And I'm a coach. I've been certified as a coach, and I own a company called Tip of the Sword, where we work with businesses to help them grow. And we use some breakthrough technology and some you know different tools that work neurologically as far as reprogramming. And I have a background that put me through working in family recovery for some time. I was with a company called the BALM. But in the last 7 years, I've owned my own company, and I'm helping. I have a couple of personal improvement programs that we do online, and I wrote a book called Designing Strengths, where we help people really get into crafting their best way of moving forward and being the best version of themselves, and finding the most easy and effortless way to move forward towards goals you want to achieve. And I work on staying out of my own head and keeping things happy and light as we move forward, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I work on today.
Man, that's really important work, man. You said something, and I think a lot of people struggle with being in their own head about a lot of things, right? Oh man,
Yeah.
it's an easy thing to do. We can talk ourselves into stuff and talk ourselves out of stuff just as quick.
Yeah, most of what I talk about doesn't come from a place of just teaching or doing or learning. It really comes from experiencing and having the opportunities myself and working through them. So I always say that everyone has the right to be their own worst enemy,
Oh
and
man,
we also have the
that's two
right to
words.
stop. Right,
Oh,
we have the right to change and do something different. And it doesn't have to be hard, but it doesn't mean it's easy.
that's true. That's very, very true. Starting like when I first got into really getting into business, right? And starting my nonprofit and all of those things that came along with it. I had heard a term, and it took me a long time to figure out what it meant. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, right? And imposter syndrome is real. It's the same concept. You could talk yourself into something, to talk yourself out of something. You are your own worst enemy when it comes down to that. We always, I was talking with a really good friend of mine, and we were talking about how we can have a great idea, right? And we put it out there, and we think in our heads that, like it's going to do this, that, and another. And then we get disappointed and we beat ourselves up when it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? That's a huge thing. And I've seen many of people quit along the way of building something good just because they wanted the overnight success. They wanted the overnight appreciation and et cetera without putting in the work. And
Right.
so I think that's part of one of the things that, when we get into your story, is understanding that there's no overnight anything when it comes down to it. You do have to put in the work, you know.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's I love how you go right to that. You said something, that in response to me introducing myself, that I do really important work. And I got to say, Tony, talking about grief is it's a big thing, right? And I think what you do is really important. And anyone that's helping people talk more about what's getting in our way. And grief is really something that is can be such a blessing, yet it can also really be something that creates blocks and gets in our way, right? And
Yeah.
or it has for me, and I've noticed it for a lot of clients and a lot of friends where, and part of that is how we get in our own head, right? It's part of
Hmm.
that is when I allow myself to get caught off guard because of some type of loss or some event, and it's not always about a loss of someone external. Sometimes it's about a part of me that I'm letting go of
Right.
and
Right.
that I'm moving through. And I get, it's like there's this opportunity. It's weird. It's odd to see people moving forward towards something that's really positive and shedding strategies they've used and then going through a grief process with that strategy.
Mm.
Wait a minute,
Yes.
I liked what I was doing and how that worked for me, and now I have to let go of that. I, I, that worked for me for a while, and I really liked what I was doing. So it's interesting all the different layers and levels to grief and how that works. But
Yeah.
it, it
And let's dive into it, right? Let's talk about, because you got a grief journey, and I want to add to what you just said, because I want people to really understand that when it comes down to grief, there's no right or wrong direction to go in. It really isn't. There's no blueprint for it, right? Because everybody's going to um, experience grief, and they're going to grow with their grief the way that they need to. That's why they say it's such an individual thing. It's just like your fingerprint, man. It's such an individual thing. The key to it is having people along to walk with you, that's not afraid to let you speak, they're not afraid to let you get inside of your head, but also not afraid to give you some tools to help you get outside of that, get outside of your head as well, right? To see
right,
things from a different perspective, not to just associate grief with the negative situations that it may arise, but to look at those situations and go, wow, if I was to just pick this apart, I can find something to hold on to. One thing that I've realized in grief is that grief is there to help you shed those things, right? It's going to redirect you, because that's what it needs to do. Because as you grow, your grief is going to require you to do other things, right? It's going to require you to become a different version of who you need moving forward. And that's going to change so many times as throughout your journey. And it's such it can be a very beautiful thing if you allow yourself um, the opportunities to learn from the things that you've experienced.
yeah.
So let's talk about your grief journey. Let's dive into your grief journey a little bit.
Well, 100% on everything you're saying, and I think that you're so right about community. And I'll follow your lead and dive into it. But one of the things you said that has been important to me over the years is it's been very easy for people to show up in my life early in my years
Mm,
and help me through some of my trauma or my grief and me feel invalidated.
yes.
And I think anyone that's listening, I just want to say, I'm speaking from my experience and my journey, and I'm sharing something about me and not asking anyone put it on themselves or take it on themselves. I'm not speaking from a place today when I share my story. I'm not speaking from a place of expertise. I'm sharing from a place of my filters and my experience with it and how I see it today, and
Yeah.
a sharing of how I did see it then from my current perspective. So I don't want to put anything on anyone, but I used to feel really invalidated by people who showed up in a great heart space of wanting to help me change my feelings,
Yeah.
but they were wanting to change my feelings because in some cases they were uncomfortable with how I was feeling. And I love them, but it wasn't necessarily helpful. So having that space in that room to be in the process of where we need to be. I just shared on my podcast about that place of when you get enough into negative self-thought talk, if you're in a place of grief, maybe there's that thing of really not so much going to the point of wallowing in it, but allowing the opportunity to feel
Hmm.
and learning the lesson from it. So I don't know. My grief journey has for much of my life has been muddy because mine started through more trauma than anything. Um, I'll give you an example. My dad left when I was 5 years old, and this is how I remember the story. And I really don't remember him leaving, but he left and moved across the country, and I don't really remember it. But for sure, when we had to get rid of his dog,
Mm.
I have this really intense emotion of watching that dog in the back of a station wagon, looking at me as the station wagon drove away, going to live with another family. And they just told me it went to a big farm where it got to be really happy. And
Yeah.
I remember crying more than I'd ever cried, right? And I'm 5 years old, right? But I have
Right.
this intense memory of the dog leaving, and I have no idea if it really happened. I've had my mother, when she was still with us, would say that that didn't really happen. But either way, I had transferred the emotion and the experience of losing my dad, not having my dad in my life anymore. I had held off feeling anything as a very young person without any real understanding of how to manage feelings. I
Hmm.
just naturally don't remember feeling anything about him and absolutely having transferred all of that power, energy, and grief into losing the dog. It was like that fine. It was like I was hanging on to hope until the dog left, right? So
Right. Yeah.
there was a serious bit of loss that happened there, but I didn't recognize that till much later as part of my grief journey. Um, although I see it clearly today. I saw more of the grief that I went through in my early 20s when I really realized there were some things going on. I thought it was more about the loss of my childhood and my innocence as a trauma survivor, having been through a number of different levels of abuse and neglect, from 5 to 12
Mm.
of things that happened. And as a 20-year-old trying to figure out life and having all of a sudden all of that surfacing and feeling crippled, just feeling incapable of moving forward to do anything,
Hmm.
realizing I need help. And of course, I was processing trauma at that point, and I learned I had been all the troubles I went through at 10, 11, 12, 15, and so on came from those were strategies. The things that were happening in my life were strategies to deal with the loss of my dad or how to overcome the trauma. And I didn't have the awareness to know that I was deploying strategies. But man, I was angry at 2021 when I was going through this and realizing I've lost my innocence. And I was
Hmm.
going through a grieving process of never being able to be a kid and always needing to fix things and improve and never being good enough and all these other things. So it was muddy at first, right?
Hmm.
Now, some people say that if you don't learn something the first time, God gives you answer. Gives you ways to learn it a second, and a
Yeah.
third, and a
Yes.
fourth. And I'll tell you, in my early 50s, I went through an experience on this. Fast forwards a lot, right? I went through an experience where my dad had passed. He in 2010 he had passed in somewhat of an emergency type of situation. And there's a story around that, and an experience around that grief, and how I chose to show up in my what I call my adaptations, right? Because I believe that there is that truth of who I am, and there's the adapted part of me, right? There's an adapted self that shows up that's trying to work through life better. And I so there was that, and then my stepfather got Alzheimer's, and we were dealing with that, and he had a very slow moving, somewhat what people would call a normal transition or sense of Alzheimer's
Hmm.
progressing. And then my mother, a few years into it, when she realized she was no longer able to take care of him, and she ended up with either Alzheimer's or a different version of dementia that moved much faster, and both of them were roaming the streets, not knowing where they were, and I ended up having to move them into a care facility
Hmm.
that was secure, so they couldn't get away. It was something I never wanted to do to anyone. Having to lock them up in a place to keep them safe. And then I was married, and my wife at the time got really sick, and she ended up having to take a bunch of medications, and ultimately became addicted to the opiates. Was what we learned, and just fell off the face of the map. So I was going through the grief of losing my parents, who I had developed a relationship with through healing trauma and
Mhm.
having done all these things that had turned positive, and all of a sudden being responsible for them. They were part of the problem as a kid, that where it was like, man, they weren't really there to take care of me. So there was this part of me saying, why are you taking care of them, man? They weren't there for you when you needed them. But then the adult version of myself is like, no, you're going to take care of them. You're going to do the right thing for you. Like I was doing the right thing for me, and that benefited them, yes. But I got to heal so much in doing that. So maybe it was a gift, maybe it's just the way the world works, but I got to go through an entirely new experience with grief. And guess what? It wasn't muddy anymore.
Mm.
This was just true loss and true. It wasn't all muddied up with this concept, because just for point of order on this process, right? When I would reach that as my 20s, I did learn through that process that I never lost my innocence. I Every time I'm experiencing innocence right now meeting with you, because
Yes.
I've never experienced this podcast with you on this format, and so there's innocence in that. It's the first time I get to do it.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's
Right.
exciting. We
But
got we got a couple comments over here. I'm gonna bring out here. Courthouse perspective said your character speaks volumes. I agree, totally agree. And then there's this comment over here. I'm going to put up here. I'm going to direct this question to you from Lincoln Smith. Curious, why was it that you thought you weren't good enough?
Lincoln, I thank you for asking that, man. There's a part of me that knew I was good enough, right? I really believe that. There was a part of me that was like, I'm good enough. And as I was fighting against the idea that I wasn't, and sometimes believing it, right? And what it was a few things. Later, and hindsight's 2020.
Mm.
I joke and I tell people it's my superpower and that the X-Men couldn't deal with it. So, you know, when I went to talk to Dr. Xavier, he says, "Sorry, son, we can't do anything with that." And I and I said, "Oh, I see that now, right?"
Yeah.
But but my hindsight, we all have hindsight. We can look back and know things we didn't know when we were going through them. So, you know, I I know today that I'm a verbal processor, and as a kid, that meant I talked too much. I know today that I'm a visionary and a dreamer, and that my strengths are centered around my belief systems and my how I can influence things around me. I just
Yeah.
know that those are natural gifts of mine that I can be of service utilizing if I use them wisely.
Right.
And if I don't use them wisely, I'm all kinds of things of dysfunction. But so at the time, not knowing it, it didn't fit the mold of someone that could achieve and get things done quickly. It didn't fit the mold that people were expecting of me, regardless of how we label it. And so I was told all the time, get your head out of the clouds. Stop, focus, learn to be disciplined, learn to do all these things. You're too much this, you're too less that, you need to do more of this. It was a constant I couldn't do enough, and I couldn't do well enough. And then on top of it, my mom taking on the pressures of all the things that she was going through, and the pressures and the anger and the upset of her husband leaving and all this other stuff.
Mm.
Um, it's She was under a lot of stress, and I was then the cause of some of her breakdowns.
Mm.
And in
Understood.
her mind, and in the way it was communicated to me, or the way that my sister would talk about it. So when I had bad dreams or anything else, I would push her, or if I wouldn't behave, I would push her over the edge, so to speak. So all of those things were happening. When things happened to me that weren't appropriate in school and in different social settings, I'd come and tell her, and she wouldn't believe me. I'd be in trouble for being where I was or talking to who I talked to, rather than being protected for what I was reporting. So I was pretty much constantly told that, man, stop it. And even as a teenager, my favorite uncle, I loved being with so much, I overheard him. I know he would have never said this to me because he loved me so much, but I overheard him saying, dude, someone else has got to take Jeff. Like, he just talks way too much. I can't handle it today.
Mm.
And, you know, he was my favorite person. And I got in the car, I got in the truck with him, and he'd be driving, and I could just say anything I needed to. And it was like a safe space that was just shattered in that moment. So, a lot of reinforcement at 7. I'll tell you the quick story on that is at 17 years old, I looked in the mirror and I literally had a conversation with myself where I said, you're going to go somewhere. I said, all right, Spikes, here's the deal. You're going somewhere where you're going to get kicked hard enough, long enough to learn discipline and focus, like everyone's telling you don't have. And the next day I joined the Marine Corps. And the premise was the final part of the phrase that I said to myself was, because you will not be 25 years old living on your dad's couch.
Mm.
So at 17, my sense of failure was that I'd be on my dad's couch and not able to do things for myself. That was my understanding of what failure would look like for me.
Yeah.
And I joined the Marine Corps and I fixed all those problems. So later in life, and this is going a little further, but later in life, I took some assessments, did some other things, learned what my strengths were. And eventually I found out that out of the CliftonStrengths themes,
Mm-hmm.
30, my least, the lowest on the list of the 34 themes were discipline and focus. But I learned to fix
Okay.
that by talking to myself like a drill instructor. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I fixed discipline and focus in my life. I didn't do it very effectively to keep me happy, but in a reactive way, I fixed it and I was no longer broken. If you interrupted me while I was acting disciplined and focused, I'd talk to you like I was a drill instructor. So I
Mm.
offended people. And it wasn't, it wasn't,
Understood.
what did they hurt people?
Yes. Yeah.
I was a
Yeah.
hurt person hurting people, right? And what got my attention was doing it to my daughters.
Mm.
They'd interrupt me, and I'd be like, "Wow, I do not want to frighten my children, man. Phew, no way." So, anyway, so that's the deal. They're part of my journey, um, of why I didn't think I was good enough, and I thought I had to fix something to be good enough.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Learning what my gifts were was powerful,
Well,
and
you know what a big portion of that is, right? And this is just my thoughts on it. And I know you're looking back on it now, and like listening to you, it's like you said a couple things. One, hurt people hurt people. Sometimes we hurt people because we don't know that we're hurting, right? And it's an emotional reaction when we do interact with people that have the best intentions of us. We will bleed all over them, and we don't even know. We just do what comes naturally to us. And sometimes not sometimes, majority of the times, it's the language, the language of grief that's misunderstood. But once you understand the language of grief, it's you can you can put yourself in a place to where you can take on what's coming at you,
agreed.
right? From the person that you're trying to help. That's the reason why I love this work so much, is because I do allow myself to be put in that situation to allow you to go ahead and do whatever you need to do, right? Without judgment. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to tell you that you're right or wrong. I'm just here to walk with you until you can develop that strength, that faith, in order to move forward.
Right.
That's it. That's all I'm here for. To allow people to share their stories and things like that, because
Yeah.
that's everything that you say is a part of the journey, that allows you to heal, right? But to share with other people as well. That's a huge part of it, And then another aspect of it, when we can look back on the past traumas and things like that, and be able to come to a place of forgiveness. But recognize when we are bleeding on other people, that's a huge thing. But it takes us having to go through that hurt, right? That
Yeah.
hurt of healing. And I don't ever want to diminish anything that has to do with healing. Healing is hard and it's painful. It will put you in places, that you never thought you would ever be in before, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And as men, when we get taught not to express ourselves, or, or I'm gonna give you something to cry about.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, we have to, we don't understand, um, we don't understand what's going on, right? And so just like you were mentioning before, we need to go and fix it, right? You know what I'm saying? We already get blamed for everything. So how can I fix it so I'm not getting
Right.
constantly getting blamed for it? Here's a reality. They're blaming us for the things that have happened to them. And
Right.
that's the hardest part that people don't understand. You know, if you can look at life and look at the people that bleed all over other people, they don't do it intentionally. It's only because they the people bled over top of them. They only do what they know,
Right.
right? And when we label things as, we want to fix these things, and things like that, I think just it's kind of underrating what's actually going on, right? And what I mean by that, we want a quick fix.
Uh,
So that's why we say, I gotta fix it. I gotta fix it. I gotta fix it. No, no, you don't have to fix it. You just, like you mentioned before, and I'm gonna say this, right? God will do things to you, and if you don't get the lesson the first time, well, you're gonna keep repeating it just with different people.
right.
But once you get outside of there and notice that the actions that are being done are so repetitive, then if you can catch it, you can sit back and you can go, maybe this time I'm going to do something different. Maybe, I know how I reacted to the past ones. Maybe I'm going to respond in a way to where it changes the directory. And we'll see
Right.
what happens from there, right? And as we know, nothing changes except for the people that play the game.
Right.
Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on that a little bit.
Well, it's interesting you said, I was thinking about this over the weekend, kind of mentally preparing for the show, and I got to thinking about the idea that there's a lot of religions and you know groups of people, communities that have traditions and rituals around loss,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly around death,
Mm-hmm.
the loss of a loved one. But really around there really are different traditions and rituals around all kinds of things, whether it's just religious or social, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
going to the bar and drinking it out, as a ritual at the end of at the end of a bad week, so to speak, or um, the way we raise pilots have a certain way of raising a glass and toasting a fellow pilot that's passed. The missing man formation, all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're all meant to give us a visceral process of letting go, of grieving. And in some, we don't, this is not meant to bring up the idea of religion and anyone's different walk of faith or of belief, but different cultures even have certain timings for things
Mm-hmm.
of, this happens for this many days, then this happens for that many days. And there's reasoning behind all of it. And there's mythology and stuff around all of it as far as what's happening. And it doesn't have to be right for it to be a valuable process. Right. So taking the time to wear a different color, to burn a candle in the back of the house or in the back of the room, or to bring homage, to pay some type of respect to that thing, right? It's we can't escape it. We can try, but I have a good friend that always says, "Run through the fire. Run through the fire. It's the fastest way. Stop trying to go around it. Just run through the fire. Get everything you can out of it." That made sense to me, and I could do it because that made it easier to be a tough guy.
Right.
I could be a man, right? Which is bogus, right? But when I finally learned to stop and just hold my family and cry with them, I didn't know how to do that. If someone was crying, I had to be strong. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
just hold them and cry with them, right? So it's I really think that there's this beauty, right? There's this just beautiful sense of understanding of connection to things if we can find a way through any of those means. Like lose the judgment around what we believe about what those all those things are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's that religion and I don't like that religion. It's not about that. It's like Who cares? Will the strategy help me pay respect to it and learn to feel and learn to be? Because the other and the all those things are fine, but the number one thing that made the most impact in my life around thinking about this was this message and understanding that feelings are mechanisms, are delivery mechanisms of lessons.
Yes. Yes.
And if I stay attached to the story of what happened and keep rehearsing that, I'll keep having the feelings and I'll keep recreating the story in different formats. But if I s- and if I but I don't want to allow the feelings because they might stay in me. It might become part of who I am. Like, oh, there's all this fear and anxiety around the judgment I have about the possibilities of what could happen with feelings.
Mm.
And there's a certain sense of a foreign nature to it because I wasn't supposed to do it. That whole idea of, and that didn't matter. This wasn't masculine or feminine. This was anyone in my family was like, boy, you gonna cry? I'm gonna give you something to cry about. That was it, right? You said it. It's
Yeah.
like we're
Yeah.
gonna give you something to cry about. Like, oh, so don't have feelings. And women would say that too. It's like be be strong, be a solid young man and do all these things. It's like, okay, so I was a lot of that, even though I was a great emoter when I couldn't help
Hmm.
myself, it didn't mean that I was skilled at how I would allow emotions to flow,
Right.
especially when they were foreign to me. So I had it was important to relearn that some stuff just by allowing and trusting that it wouldn't kill me.
Yeah.
Or it
Mm.
would flow, right? If I allowed it to flow, so a few messages. One is emotions are delivery mechanisms for a lesson. Learn the lesson, focus on the lesson, ask the feeling, what is the lesson you're meant to deliver, right? Another one is feelings aren't meant to stay in us.
Right.
If you're having feelings, they're not meant to stay in you, they're meant to flow through you. So if you stop feeling them, guess where they stay?
Yeah.
Boosh.
Yeah. Right in the body.
Right. So you read Peter Vanderkolk's, Body Keeps the Score, or
Hmm.
Peter Levine's books on, Waking the Tiger, any of these things. It's like it's clear that our bodies will store these things if we don't allow them to flow. So our fear of becoming them, therefore not allowing them, proves that what we focus on is what we create. Because if we're afraid of it, and so therefore we don't allow it, we create the problem through our fear.
Hmm.
What we're afraid of most will experience. There's another saying. So these sayings started to kind of make sense to me. And when I started going through all these treatments or these processes, I befriended some therapists and I started becoming part of support groups and some other things. And I became somewhat of a guinea pig, right?
Mm.
Guys our age, if we tried to start focusing on getting help 30 years ago, nobody knew, holotropic breath work today is some pretty cool, controlled, powerful breathing processes with people around to help someone if they are having a difficult time.
Yeah.
Back then it was hyperventilate until who knows what's happening until you can't handle it anymore, and the harder you can go, the faster it is, the better it is. And so we were taught the idea of increasing the pain level will increase the healing level
Right.
because we believe no pain, no gain.
Right.
And with grief, I found that a more powerful statement is, what if it's something different? What if that's a bad construct? What
Mm.
if we don't have to have the pain to get the gain? What if remembering the good and allowing ourselves the joy, even though that also causes some pain? What
Yes.
if we
Yes.
focus on the joy and the things that came out of it, the lessons, and stop rehearsing the stories? So then I learn every time I start going back into a story and start invigorating that pain or that angst or the negative self-talk or all those things, stop and rehearse the lesson. What I
Yeah.
learned from that, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. My dad was an idiot for leaving. He missed out on my life for 8 years or however long it was, 5, 6 years. Right? What did I learn from that? I learned from that, sure, there were some things I didn't get from him at the time, but we played catch up later. And some
Yeah.
people never get to do that. But still, what did we learn? First of all, we tend to learn that we didn't do anything wrong. But
Yeah.
I don't know the answers to what you learn. I just know, and I'm losing some of the thoughts on all the lessons. But regardless of the lesson, it's asking over and over and over. And the more we ask the lesson, the more we can let go of the story that keeps us in that rehearsal, right? Because we don't want to rehearse, we want to move through it, we want to move past it. So
Right.
feelings are meant to flow through us, not stay in us. By knowing that, allowing that, and trusting that, we can cry it out. Watch a toddler. I love watching toddlers because watch them keep getting up. They trying to walk. They never stop trying to get up. And if they get
Yeah.
hurt or if they get frustrated, they cry it out, they yell it out, they scream it out, then they're done and they're right back at trying to walk again.
Yeah.
So there's natural things within us that we unlearn, right, to be more
That's true.
appropriate. And
That's very true.
yeah,
Jeff, you said a lot. You said some things, and I want to touch on those things as well.
yeah,
But the one thing that I want to touch on, the notion of letting go, right? And this seemed to be a common thing across the board. People associate letting go with forgetting about your loved one, or forgetting about the situations and things like that.
mm,
And that's where it gets really tricky, right? Because on one hand, you want to let them know, no, that doesn't mean letting go of the person that you love. It means releasing those emotions that are inside of you, so you can begin to um, connect in a different way, right? Now, if you could tell people that all day long, they look at you like you're crazy. And just like yourself, I speak from a place of having done some work, and this is just the work that I've done. So what I've done may not work for everyone else, but the notion of getting you to a place of acknowledgement, your new world, right? And you said it best. Taking what you've learned and turn it into a lesson, something positive, something that you can hold on to and build upon, in order to fulfill your life, right, to the utmost, um, and enjoy it through that process.
yeah,
And I want to touch on the religion aspect as well. Everybody has their own beliefs, and I always tell people this: if what you believe in works for you and it makes you a good person, I'm all for it. I am all for it. My beliefs is what works for me. Yours is what works for you. So there's no judgment on my end. There's no, it doesn't bother me what other people believe in. It's not for me, right? I do what works for me. And I encourage people, whatever that looks like for you, follow it. Go along with it. Grab one to as much as you need to, because on those days when you're feeling beat up and worn down and you're feeling weak and all those things, hold on to something that can bring you some strength, right? They help you breathe. Like and you mentioned the breath work, right? You know what I'm saying? 30 years ago, nowadays, we got all kinds of tools and resources out there to be able to go into. We got guided meditation, we got holistic healing, we got breath work, we got shadow work, we got all kinds of things out there. And that's the beautiful part about now versus then. There's amazing people across the world that are stepping up and going, this can help you. So
right.
you can choose. You don't have to choose one thing. You can choose a variety of different things to add into your toolbox,
Right.
right? Because when one thing you may feel that is not working, you should be able to reach inside of there and pull out something else and go, you know what, I'm gonna give this a go right now, right? And I find that to be the just most beautiful thing in the world nowadays, because through grief, that healing, the people who are stepping up, it has been one hell of a journey to see and watch those individuals step into the light
Mm,
and share, right? And for other people to be able to grab onto it as well. That's such a beautiful thing. What you've done, right? Just there's somebody out there right now that's going back and they're taking notes and everything, and it's going to help them as well. So there's no one size that fits all when it comes down to this. There's no blueprint to it. There's no blueprint to it, right?
right.
But what you can do is that you can develop your own moving blueprint and take parts out that don't work, replace those things, right? And use them as you go along, and just to see who you become, um, not just during the process, but after that journey, right?
Right.
Who you growing to is important, because you get to make a choice. And I mean, you may not be able to choose who hurt you, and things like that, right? But throughout the process, you do get to make a choice of how you and who you become
Right.
during this process. And I've seen people become bitter. I've
Mm.
seen people become better. I've seen people who became bitter became better, and vice versa, right? And so I want people to understand, like, you're not going crazy when you're like, I used to be so far ahead, and now look at where I am, right?
Yeah.
The truth is that you cannot choose who hurt you, but you can choose who you become throughout the process, and don't be afraid to let it change you a little bit. It's a
Right.
beautiful process, right? It's, as Jeff said, it's you can choose how you show up. You can choose to allow those feelings to go through you, and you become a better individual during the process. What
Yeah.
to get your thoughts on that?
Well, a lot of us think we're not at choice, and that's the one of the biggest lies we can tell ourselves or believe in, right? Um,
Hmm.
we may not have a choice based on our beliefs or our goals or our thoughts, but we always have a choice, right? So there may be no other option that I can access in my mind that I would choose,
Hmm.
but we always have a choice. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. I've thrown my finger up many times, and some people think that you shouldn't argue that way or use foul language or whatever with God or whatever the deity of the universe is.
Right,
But
right.
I've also been told that that just means I have a better relationship as far as it's more intimate, because it's known that I'm speaking that way anyway. If it's omniscient, right? If
Hmm.
God knows everything, then He already knows I'm thinking it. So to just
Yeah.
say, "All right, up yours," and still feel loved or whatever in that relationship. And I'm
Right,
with you
right.
about religion. However, I've never been Jewish. Um, I don't think I'll convert, but I was never raised in Judaism, and doesn't even matter what's going on in the political world today about that. A friend of mine who's Jewish turned me on to a Yortzeit candle. The Yortzeit candle is a little candle that most mainstream grocery stores will have in the
Hmm.
little section of foods that are meant for the Jewish community. They're kosher, right? The kosher section. They'll have little Yortzeit candles that aren't that expensive, and they're glass, and they have a candle, and they're meant to burn for about 24 hours.
Hmm.
And on the anniversary of any of his loved ones passing, he burns one every year, and that's how he remembers them. It's
See,
like he taught
that's
me
that's
that.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I get so I do that now. I don't do it every year. April 10th of every year or April 14th of every year, I'm not going and burning a candle for my dad, but the years I remember, it's meaningful for me. My
Right,
intuition's telling me it's important that year to do that.
right.
Or but I don't have to be in the rules of it to decide that that's a good thing I can do that works for me in that moment because it brings meaning. So it's not whether or not a tradition or a ritual from anywhere is right or wrong. It's does it work for me in giving me something to touch to add the point of grief work is not that different from change or from trauma or a lot of the other work because it has a lot of the same components. As a matter of fact, the stages of grief are not that different from the stages of change, and it's going through a change, right? Going through these
Hmm.
processes, and of course they're different in many ways, but at some core fundamental process, they're all somewhat the same. And the one idea that's the same with all of it is to add as many sensory points as we can to get the most out of it possible without without digging into it so deep that we're belaboring something and making it you know more than it needs to be or something. But the point is to understand and gain a relationship with these things on all levels So if lighting a candle helps, or wearing something a certain color for a period of time, or maintaining a mindset of remembrance for a certain period of time, if that helps, all you're doing is adding some sensory input and output to it, a relationship to it that allows us to process through whatever's meant to come up in those feelings and become more of who we are, right? I heard someone the other day say alcohol didn't, I read it somewhere. So someone had found sobriety in their life. They were like, sobriety didn't change me. So they were saying, how different are you now that you're sober? What are you noticing? They're saying, I'm no different. Sobriety didn't change me. Alcohol changed me. I added alcohol to my life and it worked for a while, but it still changed me. It made me feel better. Then it made me feel worse. And then I had to quit doing it. If I wanted to have the type of life I wanted, it was important to stop doing it.
Right.
Alcohol changed me. I still get to be me. So grief, you know, man, the things that happen and don't become who we are, we still get to be who we are.
Yes. Yes.
Makes us more of who we are when
Yeah,
we're
I was
allowed
going to
when
say
we
that.
allow ourselves to process through it and
Yeah.
own it, right?
Yeah.
Because
And that's the beautiful thing about it, right? Grief is one of those things. Um, it's honest. It's honest with you, right? It says, "Hey, you're going to experience this one way or another." So we can either um, allow it to get you to a place to where not only you can be healthy,
yeah,
right, and you can remember those that have gone,
yeah,
and then you can show up in life. Because here's one of the biggest things that I've always struggled with watching other people, and that's why I love the work of grief. Right, I love showing up in people's lives when they need you the most.
mm,
Because after all the lights and the music and everybody's gone home, that's when you get in here the most.
yeah,
And Lincoln said it. Lincoln's been putting comments over here as well. And there's a few of them that I want to just put out there. Like telling people to move on, to get over it, and things like that. I've seen all of these different things. What people don't understand, those words right there will change a person's perspective on how they look at you in your world, right?
right.
Now, and I get it. Everybody's different. It's when people say those things, sometimes you have to look at it and understand that they're not saying it to be mean or anything like that towards you. They're saying it because they don't want to see you hurting, right?
They're fixing their discomfort with you. They're
Right, right.
not
And
fixing
like
you.
they're like, I don't want to see you hurt. So me being a person that I am, I want you to get over it, right?
Right.
Now here's the selfish part about those words as well. When people say those things and they want you to get over it, it's because they're so used to having you as the person that they depend on,
Right.
right? They want you to go back to moving forward in all of these different things because they're looking for the opportunity to be able to come and bleed all over you with the things because that's who they know you as, right?
Right.
So there's different things that you have to really put into the playing field when it comes down to grief, right? And understand here's the biggest thing I want people to understand. It's not personal.
It's
I know
not
it's
personal.
easy to take those things personal, but it's not personal.
Right.
People are coming at you from a place of they want you to be able to show up in their lives too
Right.
because they don't know how to show up in yours. For the most part, people do those things because they're looking for you to give them some answers about how to show up with you.
Right.
So, and that's the really tricky part about grief, Jeff. Grief. There's so many different layers that once you start to unpack and understand, it reveals itself to you.
Yeah.
It does, right? And you can show up with your grief. and you can let it just teach you, have teachable moments about those different things, because one day that person may be saying that, and then they experience something similar, and you'll notice their conversations with you after that changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to get your thoughts on that before we begin to wrap it up.
Well, I hope I answer your question on this, but when I was working at Family Recovery Resources and with the BALM, and the BALM stands for Be a Loving Mirror, and it's the loving path to family recovery. And we were working with a lot of families that had lost their loved ones to the opioid epidemic. Right?
Mhm.
People were just dropping, and one person would start a foundation in their loved one's name and go crazy, go just have all, not go crazy in a negative way, just put all their energy and effort into trying to raise money and raise awareness and do all these things to make a change and make a difference in their loved one's name, and another person wouldn't.
Right, right.
It, and both are okay.
Yeah,
Right? It's
yeah.
one person started a foundation to walk how they needed to walk with their brother, the specific person I'm thinking of, for as much as they could, and they're still walking with their brother on a daily basis,
Hmm.
and their feelings are coming up. And someone else that doesn't do that, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years into it, is still having the same rush of emotion and things that come over however they're dealing with it, because it doesn't all come at once. It's not a magic wand of, oh, I'm over it now. Like the hell with people
Yeah,
saying get over it. like
yeah.
like how about we just play cards so that maybe I can escape the momentary feelings, or watch a movie, or what are some strategies we could use that could help me remove myself from it temporarily and appreciate some community, but not have to change or be changed, and have some gentle kindness around me, and
Right.
maybe some nutrition and all whatever it is that's needed, right? Maybe some physical touch, a hug, uh, whatever, just to sit with people shoulder to shoulder. We used to aggressively move children out of traumatic situations as
Mhm.
fast as we could, thinking that was the right answer.
Right.
And now professionals that are working in the world of you know benefiting children will tell you the best thing you can do is just go sit next to them, shoulder to shoulder,
Yeah,
check in with them.
yeah.
What do you need? What's happening? Like, so that just showing up allows them to just be okay and where they're at.
Right.
Removing them quickly, wanting to change the situation, getting people out, communicates that you're not okay, and that this isn't okay, and what you've been through isn't okay. Well, how am I supposed to live with that? We've learned that that makes the mental, physical part of it worse later, as far as
Hmm.
getting past things, because, and not worse, worse is a judgment word I hate to use, but it can be more challenging and put us through less resourceful times to have gone through a violent removal, or someone trying to just get past it and never have to think about it again. When I lost my dad, I laugh about it a lot because there's some humor to it.
Right.
And I loved my dad, and he and I healed our relationship. But uh, you know, there were some things I was angry about that we never got around to. But I'll tell you some weird things about grief for me. Gosh, I hope I'm answering your question,
Oh
because I
no,
feel like
you're
it.
doing perfectly
Okay.
fine, right? And because I can definitely, I can relate on all those different levels, right?
Yeah.
And because I walk with people on a daily basis,
Right.
and that to me is my grief is my mentor, it's my teacher.
Right.
Everything about it, I enjoy walking with those, and from what you were saying earlier, and I want to just let people know what that means. You know, when people are grieving, the biggest thing that you can do is to be a visitor with the person who's grieving. And that's what
Right.
it boils down to, right? And what I mean by being a visitor, meaning that when if I know Jeff is going through something, I'm coming over. I'm not giving you an opportunity to tell me
Right.
no, right? I'm on my way over. As a matter of fact, I'm calling you while I'm at the store. Jeff, I'm at the store, man. I'm about to pick up some stuff. Coming on over, man. Did you want something to drink? Like, I'm not giving you the opportunity to sit in your grief alone. I'm
Right.
already making plans on cooking dinner. I'm making sure that you don't have to do anything. As a matter of fact, when I get there, I'm looking around. Hey, Jeff, man, I'm gonna throw these clothes in the laundry for you, man. You know what I'm saying? And you know what I'm saying? You want something to drink before I do any of this? You hungry?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'll get some sandwiches. Here you go. Sit down, because I don't want you to focus on trying to take care of me. I
Right.
don't want you to focus on trying to take care of me. As a matter of fact, while I'm doing all of this, I'm gonna sit down with you and go, hey, you want to talk? You want to throw on a movie? I'm giving you those options to be able to do exactly what you need to do as you need to do it without
Right.
taking care of any of this stuff around your home. I'm
Yeah.
ready to look out your door and go, hey, Jeff, man, I'm going to go out here and mow your lawn real quick. Where's the lawnmower? You got gas in it? No worries. You know what? I'll figure it out, man. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm alleviating everything that you thought that you needed to do.
Right.
And I'm going to continue doing that. And you're going to get so sick and tired of me.
That's how you
Like,
show up,
hey,
though.
you
You're
get over here every doggone day, man. I'm like, I know. Been out here every day. Why? Because, man, I want to make sure that you have everything that you need
right.
without having to worry about taking care of someone else.
Right.
And here's the beautiful part about it is, and I pose this question to the audience as well. When do you allow people to take care of you the way that you take care of everyone else?
Right.
I'm only giving back to you what you've given to everyone else. That's it. No more, no less.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it without expectations. Because I want to give you what you've been given.
Yeah.
To let you know what it feels like for somebody to take care of you. In those
Yeah.
moments where you need it the most, man.
Get to
You know?
join the cycle of positivity, right? You get to be a part of a cycle of health.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, Jeff, I want to say thank you. Thank you for showing up today. We definitely have to do this again, right? And I would love to.
Game.
So I pose this question: if you can leave the audience with something today, what would you leave them with?
You know, just let it happen, right?
Mm.
It's some of my grief I judged, right? Like I lost all my parents but one now, and coming from a split family with divorce and everything else, I had a bunch of parents, and then I had a few adopted grandparents, and they're all gone but one, who was my stepmother. But it's really with everyone going, and then any of the siblings involved not really wanting to have much to do with each other, I lost the opportunity to have the dream of fixing all the problems by having a perfect family. Right? I had this agenda or this initiative that I was going to be able to do things. So sometimes our life cycle, sometimes grief for me allowed me a great ability, because I was allowing myself to go through it, to just release myself from some type of intense responsibility. I had to fix a whole lot of problems for a whole lot of people other than mine. And it allowed me to start caring for myself, not so I could be selfish. So I thought one was being unselfish and learned it was selfish.
Right. Yeah.
And then learned that being okay taking care of myself so that I could be of better service to others, although it seemed selfish, was the least selfish thing I could do.
Mm. Love it.
And so just to walk through it and allow it, because you don't know what's going to come. And most of what, in my experience, we will judge about what we think is going to happen won't necessarily be the same once we go through it.
Mm.
Allow yourself the opportunity to learn what you're really meant to learn, rather than judge what you think you might learn so you have to avoid it. Allow yourself to go through it so you can release and be who you're meant to be and never lose anything.
Love it, man. I love it. How can people find you, Jeff?
You can find me. I got some links I can throw in the chat. Best place to find me is probably on my podcast. Let's see if I can copy this link and throw it in here.
Actually, can you email me your information and everything, so when I can go back in and put that in the descriptions of the episode and everything. They can go there and check it out as well.
I will do that. Because I've also got my Designing Strengths book, and you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook as Jeff Spikes. I think on Instagram I'm Spikes Jeff. There's but I have there's also some links to, book time with me or whatever. But it's really I should be pretty easy to find. But that's my podcast, and that has all the links in it as well. That's in the chat. But I'll send you in an email everything that you need to talk about where I'm coming from. I talked on my podcast about what we're doing here today, and hopefully, I'll have to send the link out too for what we're, so people can get to you more.
Yeah, I
You're
said
adding such a
that.
valuable service.
Oh man, I'm just doing my part, and you guys help make this thing possible as well, and to be able to showcase you guys to people, it's a huge honor. It's just a huge honor, man. And I'm the one who's humbled and everything, because it's a privilege to be able to, be on here, be a part of your journey, and to have conversations with you, but also, give the audience more avenues to explore how to deal with their grief as it shows up, and
Yeah.
so, and with that being said, this is going to conclude this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You know how we're doing. We're dropping daily episodes. Tune in tomorrow. We have more coming for you guys. And you guys, his information will be in the description below. And go in there, check him out. Go check out his books, all of those things. And let him know that Tony sent you over there, or let him know that you saw him over here. And if you know anyone who could benefit from the conversation that we have, do me a favor, share this with them. And if this is your first time and you made it all the way through, go over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And like I said, this is going to conclude this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Rumble, all those different platforms. Thank you guys for making this possible. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Jeff, again, thank you for being on the show. We would definitely do this again. And until next time, remember, we're just walking each other home. So make sure that we're showing up and doing the best that we can to make sure that people are comfortable grieving around you, because it means a whole lot when you can do that. You guys have a great day. Make good memories. Enjoy the weather. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.